Good morning, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of EDCO's 64th annual virtual conference and showcase, Evolve On. It was a pleasure to have had the opportunity to co-chair the 2021 Planning Committee with Belinda Witt-Graham from the town of Minto. A sincere thank you to the 2021 planning team who volunteered endless time and talents to create a wonderful program. I'd like to invite you to visit the conference website for the list of these amazing people. As you are all aware, the conference is a bit different this year, just like everything else in our lives. But that hasn't stopped us from presenting what EDCO has become known for in the industry, a diverse and thought-provoking program that will inspire, educate, and empower economic developers across the province. In appreciation to our speakers, a contribution to the EDCO Scholarship Fund has been made on their behalf. A special thank you to all of our speakers and those in our innovative showcase who are also listed on the conference website. I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping notes before we begin today's program. To connect to EDCO 2021, the conference, you will receive your login details to join the webinars on Tuesday of each week. Please make sure to check your spam or junk mail folders if you don't receive your login information. As a last resort, you can always email Taylor Chamberlain at the EDCO office. We'll post the email address in the chat below, and you can see it right there. You will receive the login details to the session videos at the conclusion of the webinar series as well. We hope that you will actively participate in all of our sessions through the Q&A chat today. The Q&A chat buttons are located at the bottom of your screen. You also have the ability to upvote questions. You'll also see a raise hand function. Let's just forget about that one and pretend it's not there. Just use the Q&A to ask those questions. Finally, if you experience any technical issues, please send an email to the address that's just about to pop up in the chat. There we go, Diane. Speaker biographies can be found on the EDCO conference website for your reference. And now, I'm happy to say we are about to begin day 2 with our tourism panel.
So good morning, and thank you for joining our session today. My name is Beth Potter. I'm the President and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario. As you know, the tourism and hospitality sector has been incredibly hard hit by this pandemic and the restrictions that have been enforced because of it. Many businesses are operating at reduced capacity when they are allowed to open at all. Many businesses haven't been allowed to open since the first wave hit last March. States of emergency, stay-at-home orders, slow vaccine rollout, and new variants are having huge impacts in another way as well. They are eroding consumer confidence, especially as it pertains to travel. They are also causing residents, those in your local community, to mistrust the safety of outsiders. So we know that tourism has been a very important economic contributor at the local level forever. And as we look towards a time when restrictions are lifted, we ask the question, how can we all work together to build back tourism? Today, we've brought together a panel to discuss exactly that, with a focus on how you, as an economic development officer, can help or facilitate the revival of a vibrant industry. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Chris Bloor. Chris is the Director of Policy and Government Affairs at TAIO. And prior to joining TAIO just before the pandemic hit last year, Christopher spent 10 years working in political communications at the House of Commons in the United Kingdom. Deborah Mansillo is the Vice President of Industry Relations and International Marketing at Destination Ontario. And has been very involved in the tourism sector for many years. She strives to expand the inclusiveness and diversity of Ontario's tourism marketing, and back in 2013 spearheaded the launch of Ontario's first LGBTQ+ tourism marketing strategy. Under her leadership, Destination Ontario published its first ever LGBTQ plus tourism marketing magazine and collaborated on campaigns with strategic partners, Travel Gay Canada, the Canadian Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, and the International Gay and Lesbian Travel Association. All of these efforts helped bring some of the largest LGBTQ2 plus events to Ontario, including IGLTA's 30th anniversary annual convention and World Pride. Michelle Harris is a Director of Economic and Community Development for the municipality of Grey Highlands. Michelle has a passion for placemaking and rural community development. She is often referred to as a change agent for using innovation, leadership, and outside the box thinking to deliver impactful and successful outcomes. The team at Tayo have had an opportunity to work with Michelle on both sides of the fence. Back when she was running a destination marketing organization, and now in her role as an economic development officer. And Janet O'Connell is the executive director at Muskoka Tourism. And she leads the destination management organization's effort to increase visitation to the district of Muskoka and promote the Muskoka brand. As we know, tourism is an important economic driver in her area, and she's advocating at all levels of government on behalf of tourism operators. So we're going to dive right into our conversation today, and I would encourage you that if you've got any questions for our panelists as we go along, to please put them in the Q&A or chat function, and we will do our very best to make sure we get all of those questions answered. So I just want to start with, the state of affairs that we're currently working in. And earlier this week, we spent 2 days at the Rural Ontario Municipal Association's conference, speaking not only to municipal leaders, but also to provincial leaders from the provincial government about how we can go about rebuilding the tourism industry as we look towards the end of a pandemic. And I just wanted to maybe turn it over to Chris first and foremost to just give a little bit of a lay of the land on what kinds of things we're talking about, what kinds of needs industry has indicated to Tayo, and what we've been taking forward to government officials.
Thanks, Beth, and good morning, everybody. As Beth said in my introduction, I joined Tayo what feels a matter of days before the pandemic started, and so my lay of the land is kind of what it has always been for me in the tourism industry. So we just came back from our virtual Roma conference, and as you can imagine, 10 months down the line of this pandemic of government mandated closures, restrictions on movement and operations, the tourism industry has faced a perfect storm of difficult situations that really no other sector has faced themselves. And after 10 months of uncertainty, after some successful winning of government, provincial and federal support, the most recent closures and the lockdowns in Ontario faced us with some real difficult challenges in terms of both how far are we along in our recovery or rebuild progression? Are we even in the rebuild progression stage at this moment, or are we still reacting to the pandemic as moving forward? And one of the most difficult elements that we face at the moment is that whilst people are forced to stay at home unless for essential reasons, many of our tourism businesses, however much they innovate, however much they diversify their offer or work and collaborate with others, like so many of ours have, and brought in revenue streams that 12 months ago might not have seemed possible, they still face a situation where for nearly a year now, their revenues have gone down, their fixed costs have gone up, and consumer confidence and consumer sentiment has obviously been at historically low levels. And with the most recent closures being implemented and with the rising case counts, Tayo's focus in the short term has been, how do we keep as many of our businesses solvent going forward? And that's been going to both provincial and federal government and saying, listen, we need sector specific support for the tourism industry. the tourism industry has really risen to the challenge set by government to say, you must be closed, you must act in a responsible way when restrictions are lifted like they were for a small time in the summer, and you must keep people safe. But the problem going forward for us is with no revenues coming in, how do we keep the lights on? How do we get people still maintaining their payroll? Because this was an industry that employed well over 400,000 people in Ontario before COVID hit. That's 3 times the number of jobs in the automotive industry in Ontario and Canada. And if you can imagine the reaction if a car manufacturing giant was going to be pulled out of Canada or the province, there would be huge news. But for some still, tourism seems to be a nice added on extra to the economy. And that's what we're really fighting at the moment. We're saying we're an integral part of the economy. When the visitor economy is hit, you can just see in our urban centres how much of a difference it's made to the downtown economy, because tourism, the international visitor economy and the domestic visitor economy interacts with every part of our economy. So moving forward, and I'll finish on this moment and pass it on to one of my colleagues, is that we're asking for sector-specific support for our industry, for direct fixed costs, for certainty for the next 12 months so businesses can make decisions about long-term operational decisions, whether to adapt their business, to add a patio. And we're asking for the provincial government to step up to the plate with the federal government to give businesses the chance to survive these next 3 to 4 months, so that when this pandemic is under control and when vaccinations and immunization has reached that tipping point, we can reap benefits. We have such an incredible offer of tourism in Ontario that when we have restrictions and movement lifted, we could really reap the economic benefit. And that's the message we're trying to get to government, that this isn't a handout. This is about protecting tax revenues for the future, protecting Ontario livelihoods, and protecting the economy, which we know if tourism doesn't rebound, then the Ontario economy won't rebound either.
Thanks, Chris. I want to turn it over to Janet now. I mean, Janet, you are newly appointed Executive Director at Tourism, Muskoka Tourism, sorry. So how have you hit the ground running, and what kinds of partners are you bringing to the table to support businesses at the local level?
Thanks, Beth. Yeah. So I joined Muskoka Tourism just this past September, so kind of mid-pandemic. I wasn't part of it for the first wave, and then now dealing with the second wave. So first thing I did when I got there was to make sure that we were providing messaging to consumers as to what they could expect, COVID protocol, et cetera, when they got to Muskoka. There was a good campaign done by a couple of our Chamber of Commerce with signage indicating, that masks need to be worn and social distancing. And so we've added all that to our website. We also added resources for business. As we know, there's many programs to help the businesses. So we kind of put that all together on our website. I've been working closely with my Chamber of Commerce that also provide visitor services in the area, and with my RTO, and many of the local EDOs I know are on here. We've all been working together because we realize that Muskoka as a district, we really need to come together and have a united kind of messaging that we're putting out, and then our recovery will be a united campaign as well.
Okay, great. And Michelle, from your perspective, what are some of the best practices and some of the challenges of destination marketing organizations and economic development offices coming together to support tourism businesses, and any lessons learned or that you can share with the folks watching today?
Thank you. Well, I'm going to reiterate what Janet said, that this collaboration, I've never seen it so powerful than I have during this crisis. And the idea of working together, what we've found, especially from our business community, most of which are tourism businesses and our broader general business community, they're small businesses, and the response of governments and the response at all levels has been overwhelming since the outset. But it also means that the flow of information is almost unmanageable and overwhelming for so many of our businesses. They don't know where to begin. They're not used to dealing with all of these layers of bureaucracy, funding applications, et cetera. So I've seen a concerted effort, not just in our region, but colleagues across the province, how we're working together to facilitate direct support for businesses. And even if it's not in the way of grants, it's about connecting our business operators to the right people. They're trying to keep, as Chris said, keep the lights on, figure out what the future looks like. So if we can help them navigate through this maze of bureaucracy, and I mean that respectfully, that is having huge value. I think what we're also finding is the direct connection to our business community. So rather than just sending an email or whatever, we're calling people, we're having conversations, because our businesses need to be heard. They're frustrated, they're afraid, and at least if they know we're all trying to achieve the same thing and we're working together. And I think that not just from our own working patterns, but from our business community, they appreciate this collaborative effort that we're all in this together.
Great, thank you. Now, Deborah, you come at this from a bit a different standpoint, and obviously with restrictions in place and changing as they have over the past 10 months, what has been Destination Ontario's approach to encourage, obviously domestic travel right now with borders closed, but also like how do we start to begin the conversation around rebuilding consumer confidence?
Well, because COVID-19 has been, as you said, an evolving challenge, we haven't been here before. This isn't 9/11. This is something all of us have really never experienced. Dating myself, I was with the organization during SARS, and this seems like, kindergarten compared to what the challenges we have now. I agree with both Michelle and Janet with regards to survive. We have to partner together. We have to work together. And that's what we've been trying to encourage. During this time period, when it first started, we looked at how can we still keep the message out? How can we still inspire? So we looked at virtual pieces. We went to our RTOs, DMOs, operators. What do you have? And everybody was up to the challenge of something innovative, as Chris mentioned, something new to keep people stimulated. And then during, I would say just prior to Christmas, we came out with a campaign which was Shop Local, to encourage people, because you couldn't travel, but we needed you to support the small businesses in your community. We sort of geo-fenced the marketing to that area. We're kind of like the icing. After the build is done, we can market it. We can do whatever you need us to do. And we want to be able to support the industry with research, trends, and communication. But it is a challenge, I must say. There are a couple of things that we're looking at now that show us where the trends are leading to when we get to the rear view mirror of this. And those are things that we'd like to employ. And we can talk about it as we go through this conversation.
Great, thanks, Deborah. Now, a question has come in, and it's one where I might be able to, sorry, there's sunshine is, there we go. I might be able to answer part of it, and I think I might turn it over to the group. But so the question is it known to the industry what the investment from government would need to be in order to bridge the gap until the mass rollout of the vaccine can be administered? And is it enough? The vaccine rollout, at least at this point, seems to be a moving target. We have been, and I think Chris can pick up on this point, from Tayo's perspective, we have certainly been working with government to understand exactly what those numbers might be. And, as we come out of this, we've had a commitment from the government to invest $150 million in a travel tax credit to help Ontarians get back to rediscovering the province. But in the meantime, in order to support the businesses themselves, we are looking at some much larger numbers. And there've been the rollout of several programs, most recently the Small Business Support Grant of up to $20,000. But coming soon from the federal level, there is the the highly affected sectors credit accessibility program, which will allow for businesses to access funds up to $1 million at a very low interest rate. What is the total price tag on this? I don't know that we have a real number on that at this point, simply because we've got businesses of all shapes and sizes and in all state of and in all kind of states of dealing with this. You know, in the first wave, any measurement that we tried to do was, you know, was impacted by the fact that businesses did have savings to draw on, but those savings are gone now. And so we're now looking at opportunities for business. How do we shore up businesses so that they can manage to survive through the second wave? Chris, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ty. It's been a bit of a rolling target as this whole situation has evolved. When we initially spoke with the provincial government and the federal government back in March, we were one of the first few organisations to come out actively for a very high wage subsidy. We came in actually at 80% back in March 2020, because we realised quite early on that this was not just going to be have an immediate effect, but it was going to have a long-term effect on behavioural attitudes, people's willingness to travel, etc. One of the first few things we did was we started our evidence generation strategy as an organisation. So it meant we had real-time information coming in from our members on the front line. That gave us a good clue on how much revenues were dropping, how many people were having to be laid off, what sort of state their savings were in, how much credit could they take on legitimately without getting to unsurmountable levels of debt. But just to give you a ballpark figure, obviously it's a $36 billion industry, but our budget submission that went into government in last October, we were around the $800 million mark. $800 million in terms of a combination of different funds to both help direct financial support for tourism businesses, to pay for energy, to pay for making payroll. But we also allocated funds to help attractions who had been almost closed throughout this period, who haven't been able to open, and to support anchor tourism businesses. We're fortunate across Ontario to have some businesses that are sort of the linchpins of regional economies across Ontario. And those businesses need substantial support. They're not in the small business category. So we were suggesting that there should be lines of credit and high levels of grants for those businesses, because they employ a lot of people in some of our smaller economies and rural economies. Going forward, I think for the next budget, when we put forward, us and both the CFIB are going to be putting forward numbers that say, listen, this isn't going to be changing anytime soon. We want to be able to be in off best foot forward when we get into the rebuild and in economic boom stage. So I suspect, and I'm writing our submission now, we want tourism specific support around the 800 million mark, and it's going to be that high again, because I'm just looking at our last survey and our results from that. There were over 100,000 tourism businesses that were growing year on year, that were growing in terms of their revenues, in terms of their staff numbers. Over 100,000 of them say they possibly won't make the next 90 days at current rates. And that's a really scary number moving forward, because we're all trying to plan and we're all trying to build capacity for when this is over. But we could be having a real seismic change in the landscape on the front line, and that's the message we're trying to get across. And that's what our numbers will reflect in the budget in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Chris. So as we talk about, rebuilding, as we think that the vaccine rollout should, we're being told that pretty much any Canadian who wants a vaccine should hopefully, fingers crossed, be able to have one by September. So as we look to how we rebuild, just maybe, and I'll start with you, Michelle, how can, from an economic development standpoint, offices that are often involved in helping to support community events as attractors to bring people together and showcase or highlight a community through a festival. What's the risk factor? Like, how much should communities be investing in reopening or restarting events, especially with consumer confidence low? Like we've got to work on both things at the same time. So what advice would you give to your colleagues in the economic development offices around kind of starting up again?
Thank you, Beth. So there's a couple of things. When we chatted last week as we were prepping for this conversation today, and I notice everybody is intentionally using the word rebuild rather than recover. And I think we're all going to need to be aware that how tourism moves forward may be different in the coming years. What we've traditionally done in regards to tourism experiences, and I would say specifically events, is going to need to change dramatically, not just from how we're delivering those events, but primarily because of consumer confidence. And when I talk to businesses, there is fear now around how much they're willing to invest. And it's not that there's not a passion to invest in the way, to host a big event, but most of these events need a certain number to be able to make things happen. And they can do all of the great work, but if they're only getting 20% of the consumer base coming to that event, it is not going to work. So as we look to rebuild our tourism sector, I think we're really going to have to look at the visitor experience through a different lens. I think it's really critical as well that we think about the visitor experience moving forward and making sure that we are delivering a quality experience, first and foremost to our own residents across the province. I mean, right now, our geographic range for things is smaller. We have a captive audience here in Ontario. So making sure that when we deliver these experiences, we are providing an exceptional experience. And I know, and I can speak, I suspect for everybody who is listening in on this call, especially areas outside of the large urban centers, and specifically the outdoor spaces, we are struggling with now tourism overcapacity. So what does our infrastructure look like? And I think this needs to be a long game, and it needs to be a shared messaging across all the province. So how are we dealing with visitors who come to our outdoor spaces? How are we making sure that they're having an exceptional customer experience, but also that the messaging is consistent? So if you need to know about parking, or you need to know about what to do with your garbage, that we're all doing this together, but it's the same old. We can't build the same old boat and expect it to work in this environment anymore. We're going to have to rebuild the boat in a different way. And I think that as economic development and tourism professionals, we've always been innovative and adaptive to that. And I think we're going to need to pull on that expertise more than ever. And as we're coaching our businesses, that needs to be messaging. I believe that needs to be out there.
I couldn't agree with you more. And on that note, I mean, it's not just how do we communicate to our captive audience, but how do we, and Jan, I'm gonna lob this one to you. How do we reassure our local residents that opening up to the domestic visitor is a safe thing to do? Maybe Janet, you can speak to some of the efforts that you've made in that area, and maybe, I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about the Safe Travel Stamp or not.
Yeah, so we, the Safe Travel Stamp is one thing that we have ourselves, Muskoka Tourism, through TAIO. We have the Safe Travel Stamp, and Beth, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that after how you get it. But moving forward, that's a global initiative. And I think one of the things we have to be aware of, and Michelle said it, is about consistency. So one of the things that's really important is the messaging that we're going to put out there about, what happens when you travel to Muskoka. Is it the same as if I travel to Waterloo or Kitchener or somewhere like that? And I think that's going to be important. I think one of the things we've been doing right now is, as a destination management organization, it's a little bit difficult to market right now, even on our just a simple picture like the one behind me on my Instagram is like, hey, you're causing people to travel. We've crafted some messaging around that saying, hey, it's not the time to travel. You know, we're just bringing you a virtual Muskoka experience, and when the time is right. And we have both our permanent residents and our seasonal residents who are some who have stayed permanently in Muskoka during this period. So we want to make sure that we're reassuring people that you know, we're following the guidelines and when it is right to travel, and all those protocols around how they're going to interact, I think are the important part of that messaging, Beth, to make sure that we're telling people what's required. And our businesses are all trying so hard and doing all the protocols and making sure that they're telling people what their protocols are too, I think is how we're going to reassure people. And that consistent message across everyone, all the way from Destination Ontario down to the smaller DMOs, down to the smaller visitors centers and BIAs. I think having that consistent message is the way to go.
Great, thank you. And I'll just, before we go on to the next question, and I've got a few in the Q&A, but the Safe Travel Stamp is something that Tayo has worked at the global level with the World Travel and Tourism Council to bring to Canada. It's based on global standard protocols for the different sectors of the tourism industry. And it's a free program. The idea is that we have vetted all of the health and hygiene protocols that businesses in our sector are using, from the ones that have been developed locally all the way up to the global. Everything has been cross-vetted, and the Safe Travel Stamp is an indicator to the consumer globally that this business, this destination is operating and meeting those global standards. So it's a confidence booster where you are obviously in the process of getting businesses on board with the program right now. And when we can start to travel again, there will be a consumer awareness program or campaign to support it. But speaking of that, there's going to be a lot of people fighting for the same visitor coming forward, and we all we all want to be on the same page, but we also have want to be able to iterate our differences and encourage people to come forward. So maybe Deborah, maybe you can talk about how from Destination Ontario on down, how do we work collaboratively as an industry, and how do we do things the same, but do things differently from a marketing perspective as we go forward?
Well, I just want to reiterate, just like you all said, the safety is going to be key, and the consistent messaging is definitely going to be key. It's going to take the anxiety out of the consumer when they decide to travel again. What we're going to have to do, and which we've alluded to before, is we really have to partner. We're going to have to work together. We're going to have to build itineraries where I'm able to share your experience with my business, because that's the only way it's going to work. We're going to see travelers now who are going to be more thoughtful. They're going to look for sustainability. They're going to look for more or less slow travel. They're going to be more purposeful in what they do. And so even if you start small with the domestic traveler, they're going to look for common things that they can do within the same area and then branch out. And I think that's going to be really, really important. And that's what we're going to have to market together. We can't go it alone. We can't say, I've got this great attraction and not worry about what's around in the surrounding area or something that complements it, because we just won't survive that way. And so I think that's going to be very important. I think like one of the examples to me that I've seen is Singapore is a nation that normally it's one of the most cleanest countries you can ever visit. I've been there several times. Like you can't even chew gum or eat beverages on the train or public transportation. And their airline, their national airline, has come out and said, from the time you hit our airport, from start to finish, the whole journey, everybody will be vaccinated. So that's something that's going to give people confidence. And if we could have the same sort of message cascading down, I think that will be very effective.
Great, thank you. Another question from the chat. There's last summer when some of the restrictions were lifted, some tourism businesses in some communities did see an uptick in their business. The question to the panel is, are you seeing any patterns with respect to geography and or tourism subsectors that are most negatively affected? Go ahead, Deborah.
Sorry. I think what we saw when some of the restrictions were lifted in the summer, that people were exiting the cities and heading north because there was space, there was outdoors, and that's what the government and the industry were sort of marketing. And so I think you're going to see a return to that. The cities are going to have a harder time building, but we have to keep those cities vital and active. So we're going to have to find ways to communicate that message. Our cities are safe. We're going to have to make allowances where the hotels in Ontario, they're going to have to look at different ways to offer that same sort of feeling you get when you're up north. Spread it out. If the activities are more outdoor, just going to have to look at it differently. But we did see an uptake definitely in the north and people wanting to explore, which was great to see. I mean, there was the silver lining to that piece.
Great, Janet, you look like
yeah, if I can add to that. So Muskoka being just, as we always say, an hour and a half, 2 hours north of Toronto, we certainly saw an uptake. And I think where we're concerned is that over tourism. We have all the outside space, but then you go, I was horrified one day. I went to one of the trails and the number of cars that were there. And so we have to try harder at spreading people around the area, finding those hidden gems and talk about those hidden gems. In the fall, not always talking about going to Algonquin Park to see the colors. Hey, where else can you go? And we had some good examples of that. So that's one thing we're really going to have to work on when we start that, opening the door again. Where are the people going and what's our strategy and what infrastructure can we expand on to assist with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
And Beth, if I may jump in there, there's an advantage and a disadvantage to this. Yes, we're seeing consumers looking for more niche, personalized, customized experiences where there's a connection to a place where they're feeling safe. I think obviously the ones that are going to struggle are the large volume attractions and events, because that's not what consumers are looking for. But when we go back to the previous question, talking about how we're going to deal with competing against one another, I think this provides an interesting opportunity. And to build on what Janet said, not only do we need to move people around, so of necessity, in order to manage volumes, we're going to need to share these experiences and making sure we're connecting with the business down the road so that they're benefiting from it. And the other thing that I think we have to be very careful about, while we're seeing this return to outdoor spaces, that's also not necessarily generating economic activity. It may be generating pressure on these outdoor spaces, but it's not driving money into our economy. So how do we take those visitors who are coming to hike the trails? How do we translate that into an economic benefit? And what partners are we bringing into the conversation? And certainly during the first wave and even during the second wave, I hate to say it, but I'm seeing some of our traditional businesses who are very stuck in their old mode, struggling with how to adapt. But I am seeing positivity, what I'm saying, some really innovative, wonderful programming that connects to food, the land, our natural experience, which is what Canada and rural Ontario and sort of broader, not just rural, but what we're known for. So how do we embrace that, but translate it into an economic value for our businesses? Because if we don't do that, all we're going to be dealing with is the cost of over-tourism and no benefit to it.
Right. Well, and on that, I think that there's another hurdle that that we're facing too, and I think that over the last number of years, as an industry, we've certainly embraced social media as a way to showcase the experiences and destinations that we have on offer here in Ontario. But I think that we're kind of battling ourselves right now too, because when somebody takes a picture of a lot of cars in a parking lot or a lot of people, and they're taking it, from, it's a one plane, a one dimension view of things, and you're not seeing that, oh, if you looked at it from overhead, that eagle eye view, that those people are really socially distancing. So we're kind of battling a little bit of our own success in that respect. And so how do we address that going forward? I'm going to throw it to you, Deborah.
Oh, okay. I think it really is we approach it in the way we're going to market it. As Michelle mentioned, people are going to be looking for more customized, more thoughtful travel. And so I think we're going to have to give that message when we're telling the story. It's a story that we're going to be telling. So whether it starts with being secure with your health, being considerate of where you are, we have to teach the behavior to the traveler. You can't, come into a destination and not be courteous or respectful of where you are. So I think that's going to be part of the story that we should be telling. It's a bigger picture.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to go to our Q&A. There's a number of questions here, and there's some questions around access to funds, low interest loans, and that kind of thing. And there are quite a number of programs out there. We have a list of those programs on our website in our COVID section. The federal government's Regional Relief and Recovery Program is a program that is available to businesses that can certainly apply for low interest rate loans. For larger businesses, the HASCAP program will open on February 1st. And I saw one question in there about community theater, and I would encourage you to check out the Ontario Trillium Foundation. They have, in the last budget, were given a pot of funding to support community level tourism businesses, including local community theaters. So I would check those out, and if you need additional help in finding them, please don't hesitate to contact the TIO office. I'm just going to go back to and sorry, I'm just going to also answer some questions around the Safe Travel Stamp. So just so you understand how the travel stamp works, any business in Ontario has to follow protocols that have been approved by their local public health unit. And those protocols could be ones that have been designed by the Ministry of Labor through the Workplace Safety and Prevention Services group. They could be designed by a sector association like Dine Safe or Stay Safe, or they could be designed by an outside group like the Post Promise. And we as TIO have had all of the protocols at the global level vetted by the health professionals here, the Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, the Ministry of Labor. We've had global standards vetted provincially, and we've had all of the provincial standards vetted globally. So if a business or a destination attests to the fact that they are following these standards, then they can enroll in the Safe Travel Stamp and use the stamp. Now, we do have standard operating procedures in place in case somebody discovers a business that perhaps may not be following the protocols. And so we have procedures in place where we work with the local public health unit to investigate. And I can tell you that that procedure works. We've already used it once, and so we're covered from that perspective. the public health units are the ones at the local level that are responsible for ensuring that businesses are following health and safety and hygiene related guidelines. So we are working directly with them. So I just hope that if that answers the questions on the Safe Travel Stamp, and please, by all means, if you have additional questions, reach out to us at TIO. Maxine Morale West is our stakeholder relations manager, and she's managing that program for us. Okay, so there's a question here around Packaging Ontario, and how do we encourage people to discover parts of the province and experiences that are available in our province that we just may not know about, and how do we get folks to go farther north than Muskoka, or farther east than Peterborough, or farther south than Guelph? Any ideas? And I'm gonna toss this back to Michelle and Janet and Deborah.
Deborah, do you want to go
Sure.
first?
First of all, we only know what we know. So you have to let us know what's your experiences. How can we help support it? We're open to do that. Not a problem. But as I said, talk within your RTOs, your DMOs, and say, hey, this is something we need to promote, and get it to us, and we will do that. Because unless we know about it, we can't share the information. And we have so many platforms that we can share it, and we're always looking for that little special jewel, that little nugget. So we're there to support that 100%.
Great.
I'll jump in here a bit, Beth, if I may. I think this is an opportunity as well for sectors to get involved a little bit more. We've always, in the tourism industry, there's always been this issue around geography versus, competing within a geography versus competing with an experience. I think we know here, if we really believe, and I think we should be looking at moving people around the province for a variety of reasons, but also just to diffuse volumes in certain centers. I think this is we have so much psychographic and demographic information about what travelers are looking for now. Now there's a really interesting opportunity, for instance, for cyclists who are really keen, road cyclists. Well, where can they go beyond just Caledon or the Beaver Valley or whatever? How do we move those? And I think if we start having our sector groups and experiences work together, we can hone in a little bit on the travel patterns and the experiences people are looking for, to find a way to more strategically have all our regions of the province benefit from those travelers.
Wonderful, thank you.
Totally agree with that, Michelle.
Well, you're all in agreement, so I love it.
We should be.
Chris, I just wanted to we've got some more work coming, and we've based all of our work on what we call an evidence generation strategy. Do you want to just talk about some of the future work that we're looking at from a research and measurement perspective?
Yeah, sure. So our evidence generation strategy is sort of the foundations from which we're building our policy recommendations moving forward. And we've got a two-pronged approach at the moment from that evidence generation strategy. That's, first off, is measuring what's happening on the front line at the moment, and measuring the capacity for those businesses to survive the next 2 to 3 months, and to measure the capacity to be part of the rebuilding process that all the panelists have mentioned today. But also, we're sort of trying to get into those long-term files that existed before COVID, and how now, if we act on those files, such as infrastructure, we've talked about transport, reforming our transport system so that we can effectively move people around the province, affordable housing so that we can get workers close to attractions and businesses and tourism businesses, that we have that flow of workers that we need. But we're going to be, in immediate short term, we're going to be focusing on the continuing to resolve the insolvency issue in businesses, but try and give the provincial and the federal government the tools they need to make those long-term decisions about what we need to do in terms of making sure that we reap the benefit of that economic recovery. And the data that we bring in from our members is really important for that, because it tells us the story of what their businesses will look like in 18 months and 24 months. Some of the attendees and the panelists have talked about how some businesses are really thriving in the situation and adapting, and we're just trying to pass all that information on. We're trying to be honest brokers to the government, and that's what our evidence generation strategy is about. It's about giving them the most up-to-date information about a really innovative industry, about what we can do, what we can do with small amounts of support, what we can do if regulatory changes are made to free the tourism industry, and also talking to our municipal partners and what's happening in the regions. You know, some of the panelists made really good comments about what happened in the summer. People left the cities. People, you know, as a Brit myself, I started traveling around Ontario, seeing things that weren't on TripAdvisor or weren't listed in the books. And, you know, there are real capacity issues there moving forward, that if we work now to assess the data coming in from the last summer and the Q3 and Q4, we can help our municipalities build the capacity and build the infrastructure and the transport needs that they need to reap the benefits. Because one of the key pieces of information that we have, as you know, Beth, is that consumer sentiment to travel abroad is really low at the moment, and it's going to remain low for a long time. And that's why we work so hard to get the staycation credit as a key platform from Tayo into the budget. There's 150 million set aside by the government to support that staycation in terms of tax credit. We want people to use that, but we also want to utilize the dollars that usually leave Canada, that usually leave Ontario, and we want to put those dollars back into the Ontario economy and the tourism industry. And like Michelle's mentioned, there's some businesses that are really rising up to the challenge right now. If we can make sure that they can take those people who usually travel abroad safely, that they have the capacity to do so, we could really enjoy a really exciting Q3 and Q4. Hopefully when everyone's had the needle in their arm and we've got herd immunity, we could really have a boom period, and we could really evolve the tourism industry in Ontario. This isn't about trying to stay the same that we were before March. This is about us moving on to the next level, onto the next stage. And I think that's really exciting. So our evidence generation strategy is about trying to give the government the best set of information that they can base those decisions on moving forward.
Great, thank you. And to your point, I'll be asking Janet and Michelle and Deborah if they've got kind of any final thoughts. But you know, one of the things that we sometimes forget to tell people is that 80% of our visitor economy here in Ontario is domestic, and so now we know that international visitors take longer trips. They spend more money. But if we can increase, we did this survey just before Christmas, and if we can increase our visitors, our domestic visitors, to be out and taking trips in Ontario, if we can increase it by 10%, we can add almost $2 billion in tourism revenues to the Ontario economy. So, we have the power as our own province to help us come out of or start to come out of the situation that we're in now. We're getting very close on time, and so I just want to give everybody a chance to maybe just a few final remarks. So Janet, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Beth. And thanks for having me on the panel. Just real quickly, one idea I've taken away from this is I sit on the Economic Recovery Task Force here, and I think I'm gonna ask them to prioritize when we go back to rebuilding and reopening, what areas or let's look at what we can prioritize in terms of facilities that we have that we want to start off with, instead of just the normal that we would always promote. What are those hidden gems that we could start promoting?
Fantastic. And Michelle?
And I'm not minimizing, this has been a horrible, devastating time for businesses, but crisis also gives you a chance to rethink and look about the future and be forward thinking. And I think this, given some of the innovation we've already seen, I think this is a real really interesting time for us to be able to become even bigger leaders in this industry by embracing the challenge and finding a way to work it to our advantage. And I think the collaboration we're seeing around the province is going to be key to that. And I like to leave on a positive message, and I think that's really a great opportunity.
Wonderful. And Deborah.
I see, the new normal going forward is that we have to create the romance of travel. We now realize that travel was a privilege and we may have taken it for granted. And now we have the ability to explore, take the time to sit back and rebuild and see what we were lacking and just improve upon it. Because yeah, Michelle, Janet, you're correct, and Chris and Beth, this is an opportunity and we shouldn't shy away from it.
That's great. I love that. Recreate the romance of travel again. I love that. Chris, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just the fellow panelists are on the front line. I'm really more someone who interprets the data coming in and tries to work with government to implement it. But I think it's like Michelle said. There's two prongs to this. First of all, we're working incredibly hard to try and keep as many tourism businesses afloat and solvent as we can. But we're also doing all that we can. Sorry, my cat just joins me. But we're also doing all that we can to make sure that when this is over, tourism businesses are in the best position able to reap the benefits of the recovery and hopefully an exciting time within the industry moving forward. So we're there for you now, and we're trying all our best to make sure you're as best prepared moving forward.
Excellent. And I would just like to end on this. First of all, I want to thank all of the panelists for being here and for sharing their insights. They are all wonderful people who are doing wonderful things behind the scenes. And so please, reach out to them, reach out to the destination marketing organization in your area. Somebody wrote in the chat that tourism and economic development are natural partners, and they certainly are. Tayo is absolutely proud to stand as a partner with EDCO, and certainly Heather and I have worked collaboratively together throughout this pandemic, and we will continue to do so. And we look forward to the next phase of this conversation when we are in a place where we are talking about what does the rebuild look like and how is it coming along, and all of the great and creative ideas that have bubbled to the top. So I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank the 200 people that have listened in. Again, if you need any further information, please don't hesitate to reach out to Tayo. You can do so at tiaontario.ca. And I want to thank Kate Burns Gallagher and Heather Lalonde for inviting us to be here today and to share our insight on a valuable industry and one that we can all be working together. So thanks everyone, and have a great day. Back to you, Kate.
You.
Great. Thanks so much, Beth. And thank you to the entire panel for an absolutely amazing session. Some incredible takeaways I found were it's all about the power of working together. And I really liked the rebuilding. Let's use the word rebuilding instead of that recovery. So thanks everyone. We really appreciate it. And Chris, we have our first cat appearance at EDCO. Thank you. That was awesome. And just a reminder to everyone to make sure to have a look in the chat. There are some great conversations happening there, and great examples of things happening in Vermont and other Alberta parks as well was mentioned. So if you have the opportunity, check out to see what things are happening in the chat. EDCO is pleased to announce that in lieu of speaker gifts, we will be making a contribution to the EDCO Scholarship Fund, and that will be made in all of your honors. So thank you once again for taking the time today. We really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. EDCO's Award of Excellence program had a huge response this year. Today, EDCO is excited to start to announce the winners. Each week, for the duration of the conference series, winners will be featured during the morning. Congratulations to all of the award participants. The feedback from judges was that the economic development response to the pandemic was innovative, and dare I say, we all pivot well. Please take a look at our first award announcement. Congratulations to all the award winners, well deserved. And congratulations as well to the awards committee who also pivoted to be able to present to you today. We'll now take a short break where you can continue conversations in the chat right below here and get a drink or take that much needed bio break. We'll see you all back here at 10:15 for our next session, Up to Speed, Ontario's Broadband and Cellular Action Plan, which I guarantee you will not want to miss. See you in 15.